Welcome back to Do You Pay the One? This is our fourth episode, and we have a little bit of housekeeping to do as we get into things today, mainly because the lineup has changed ever so slightly. Unfortunately, due to some in real life things, Beth has withdrawn from the show. We wish her best of luck and hope that she gets all of her ducks in a row again. But she is a streamer and a content creator in other forms and just didn't actually have the time to commit to this. So she's parted ways. Everything's all good. We are still planning to play a game of Commander as a pod of four as we started the podcast. So you will still see her around at some point. We might even get her as a guest at some point as well when things calm down for her. But yeah, again, Beth, wish you the best, and we'll see you around on Twitter and whatnot. Also, RJ has some stuff going on health-wise and is having a procedure done where he's not going to be able to join us to record for a month or so. We're hoping only the couple episodes that he'll miss, but it could be a little bit longer than that. We shall see. Whatever the case, we will keep you updated as new episodes come up as to when he will return. On that note, we are tentatively looking to have auditions for a fourth host again. Somebody who can obviously commit to doing it at certain times and wants to be involved in the project. But we'll iron out those details at some point and get back to everyone with that. Otherwise, we're most likely going to try and book some guests over the next month or so, just so that we have more voices in the chat. We do appreciate having some diversity in the conversation, so that more opinions are represented. Particularly because part of the angle of the show was casual to CEDH, and we kind of want to keep that sort of spirit alive, so we may end up tapping into some people that are leaning harder into the casual aspect of the game to keep that perspective alive. So otherwise, Fitz, how's it going?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. Glad to be back, and like you said, we wish RJ all the best with his recovery, and same to Beth. Hope that everything goes well for her and she is happy and healthy.
For sure. So we'll move right into it. This episode is about Treasure's design and how that's changed over the course of its history as a mechanic in the game or a token in the game, however you want to look at that. Also, what we think is good about it, what's bad about it, and more just overarching thoughts about treasures and if they are good or bad for the game. But as
some of them are good, Dockside is very bad.
Depending on who you ask and depending on the format.
Yeah.
And yes, we obviously are going to have some opinions about this, but keeping with our general format, we're going to jump into the Breaking the Ice section. And Fitz, you're the only other person besides me, so you get to go first. You win.
Just like everyone else, I'm trying to jam my cards in from New Capenna into my commander decks before the net set comes out in like 6 weeks. That's kind of been it. I don't really have anything cool to say.
All right, nothing too exciting going on this week. For me, it's been mainly MLC practice, which like last weekend on my stream, we played 5 games. 4 out of the 5 were played with another MLC player, Pontus, and we played a lot. Like it was a good session, a lot of quick games, a couple longer ones. I ended up winning 3 of the games with 3 of my MLC decks, so that felt like a win to me. The last few days I've had a few more games, got a couple more wins here and there, so it's looking good. I'm feeling confident going into the tournament, which is
that's good.
Approaching very quickly. My first games are on the 14th, so we're like a week and a half away, I think. It's gonna be a thing. Otherwise, just on the merch side of things, I did mention, I think, that I was working on playmats. Well, that's gone through. My Inked Gaming partnership is live. You can get the Possibility Storm, my YouTube channel, playmats, and this podcast logo on a playmat. Moving on to the next section, current events. The biggest one for me is Command Fest is coming back. I guess that's what they're calling it now. Used to be called the Grand Prix, and it was always like a standard / modern, etc.
They had some legacy ones and shit too back in the day,
right
before the old pandemic.
Right. So it was basically the place where 60 card formats would go to do their thing, but then there was always the EDH section or free to play tables or whatever you want to call them, where people would just get together after their tournaments or before their tournaments and just jam some EDH. So those, then at some point they changed it to Magic Fest. I know I went in 2018 in Las Vegas, and it was GP Vegas, and then the very next year it was Magic Fest. And I know because prior to that, all there was a lot of cool playmats made that had like Grand Prix whatever on it from like all over the world, because it was always the Grand Prix. And then all of a sudden it was just this lightning bolt promo thing, that there was a promo card and then the playmat. I ended up getting the playmat. Well, it was two halves basically. There's the part with Rakdos getting lightning bolted, and then there's the part with the like shaman or whatever in the air shooting the lightning bolt. Maybe it's called, I don't know who it is. Anyway, but yeah, it said Magic Fest on it, and that was basically all there was. Now it's called Command Fest, I guess. Still run by Channel Fireball. Still costs about $100 for the weekend. I already paid for mine. Vegas is June 10th to the 12th. I'm planning on going out the night of the 9th and staying through till the afternoon of the 12th.
Hell yeah.
Looking forward to that. I already know Tim Gold Sabertooth, the guy who does a bunch of altars for everybody, did this logo and for the sleeves as well. He's going, so I'm looking forward to meeting him. A couple of the MLC players. There's going to be some people there, and I look forward to meeting people. If you are going and you're interested in hanging out, playing a game, you can. All the contact info is in description, so you can hit me up. I don't know. There's a bunch of other ones as well all over the country, so I know a lot of people are going to a lot of them. But
I know Richmond's the big one that people are excited about. I've seen a lot of people talk about that. And the one that's in like near Seattle, but not in Seattle, Bellevue. I know a lot of people are talking about going there.
Yeah, I think that one is kind of close to where Card Kingdom and the Mox House or whatever it is.
Mox Boarding House.
Yeah, I want to say that those are kind of in that area. So, so there's a lot of us in the Twitter sphere, at least, that are East Coast, that are going to some of those other ones. So I'm sure no matter where you live, somebody you might know and follow on social media is going to be there. I know the first one I went to in 2018, I met Josh Lee Kwai, shook his hand. Didn't really talk for more than like 30 seconds, but it was kind of cool. It's like, hey, never seen this guy before in my life. He shook my hand. Like, that's cool.
Like, hey, he isn't a total asshole. That's rad.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's a cool thing. This kind of is a lead on from what we talked about last week with some of the other conventions that were happening. But then this announcement literally happened between the last episode and this. So it's like, this is the one I was waiting for. It's here. I've already reserved a room. I'm going. Hope to see some people there.
Yeah, so. I'd love to. Unfortunately, the only Canadian one is Montreal, and that is pretty far away from British Columbia.
I have no idea, just like you don't know anything about
it's like the other side of the other side of the country.
I just remember you saying something about that. That's funny. So yeah, I mean that's pretty much all that's going on current event wise with Magic. So we're going to move on to the main conversation topic, which is treasures and whether or not they are good for the format, the impact they've had on the format, and such. So I think a good place to start is with the history of treasures. When did they start out, Fitz?
In Ixalan, and we all thought it was something funny, like, oh, pirates, treasure, that makes sense. They seem harmless.
Yeah, and right before that, there was gold, right? I think it was in a Precon?
I think it was in Theros. Yeah, King Makar. There was a couple gold cards in commander decks.
Right. Yeah,
And then
I remember
Curse
it
of
from a
Opulence
commander
is
deck.
kind of the big one.
Yeah, yeah. And so the key difference is that gold didn't need to tap to sacrifice to create the color or any color of mana, whereas a treasure does, which makes gold significantly better because if you think about it, blind obedience and you on the board and you cast a dockside, getting 5 tapped treasures does nothing for you, but 5 tapped gold you just sack them anyway. So gold, they figured out pretty quickly that gold may be a little too powerful, so they added that little tap clause and you have a treasure. So in Ixalan, it did have cards with the pirates that capitalized on treasure, like Captain Lannery Storm made a treasure every attack, and that has been exploited since then because of the additional support printed. There's
Pitiless Plunderer. That card is a powerhouse in Aristocrat decks.
For sure. And then, like, Revel in Riches, which was an alternate win con if you could manage. But at the time, there wasn't enough treasure support for that to really be viable. It was mostly just wish and a prayer, fairy tale land. I might get there by my upkeep and nobody blows this thing up. But I bet you people did win like that, especially in more battle cruiser metas. Like, yeah, of course, they're probably fine.
Like, I have a pirate themed deck, and I've gotten there with Revel and Riches a couple years ago before some of the stronger cards were printed. You just like dirtle enough, and you're like, "Hey, I got 10 of them," and someone's like, "Fuck, I forgot about that." And then the game, and I won. I was like, "Yeah, that's cool."
Yeah, I mean, and that's why they printed alternate win cons like that, because it gives you that opportunity to stall the game out long enough to get to this win condition. I mean, the gates, like Maze's End, like that's a really dragged out win condition, but if you can do it, like high five, like achievement unlocked. You did the thing. And I've won with Revel and Riches, and it is hard to do, but it's doable. It's way easier now than it used to be. If you got a Smothering Tithe in your deck and Dockside, you're probably getting there pretty fucking fast. So,
yeah, those will do the heavy lifting for sure.
Right. So from there, we saw, I think, really, that is when it started to go OP, is with what I just mentioned, Smothering Tide and Dockside. Prior to that, it was just cute. Like, there was also Brass's Bounty, where it was like number of lands you control or whatever. You create that many treasure tokens, which is very similar to that new one, the green one, but we'll get back Stash. To that. Yeah. But yeah, Smothering Tithe, especially when the more of the wheel meta was a thing, Smothering Tithe, yeah, like people wheel and all of a sudden you get 21 treasures, because they're not paying 2 per draw, like, unless they might pay 2 and you get 1 less draw from that guy, but then you still get 20 treasures. Like, that's outrageous, especially in white. That's probably the single biggest ramp spell that white's ever gotten.
Oh, I agree. I don't really consider stuff like land tax ramp, so yeah. And it's been a staple since it hit. Since they printed in 2019 or whatever.
For obvious reasons, yeah. Yeah. And the Dockside was part of a... Dockside was arguably bad in the sense that it wasn't a standard issue. Like, it wasn't printed in standard. Instead was part of a commander deck. That, still, funny enough, the last time I checked, Dockside individually cost more than the entirety of the precon, and you could still order them online. So it was like, why would you buy a $60 Dockside when you can still buy a fucking $50 precon that contains a Dockside?
Because then you're stuck with all those bad cards from that Savine deck. That deck sucked.
No, but it also had Savine's Reclamation.
Yeah,
great
I guess.
Card. It's still got a Soul Ring in it. It's still got some shitty lands and a command tower. It's stuff that you don't have to proxy. I like that. Like, I'll pay $40 for a precon to get the chaff, because you always get a Soul Ring, you always get an Arcane Signet, you always get at least
command tower,
a pain land or something you might be able to use somewhere. You get some random bullshit reprints that you don't give a fuck about, and you already have 5 copies of, and you're like, why do they keep reprinting this thing when they need to reprint Dockside? But here we are. that is the thing. But then, honestly, from there, it kind of started broadening a bit. It was kind of like initially, like black and red, I think got the most treasure support because that was kind of the treasure colors because of pirates. Even though they were Grixis, I don't remember there being a lot of support in blue.
There's a couple, but they're like 4 mana, draw 2 cards, make a treasure type things. They're pretty not like they're not very impactful.
Yeah, I don't remember it being like
they were pretty tame. The blue
enough.
ones.
Yeah, so like Grixis pirates were a thing, so that was kind of why red and black got most of those cards. And then they threw out the random white card that did it. And then they kind of went, okay, we're going to reel it back in a little bit, but also just kind of spread the ability to make treasures around. They basically decided to take treasures from being kind of a gimmicky thing to being mainstream, being something that's printed in every set, basically, and is kind of universal across colors. Everybody gets treasures. Like there's not a single there isn't a color that doesn't make treasures. So
not after New Capenna.
All right, so either way, it kind of became to where it's more universal, and this is when we started seeing Malcolm, Ragavan, Commander Legends was Malcolm, and some other cards that dealt with treasures. They added more pirates, which obviously had more to do with treasures again, and then Modern Horizons and Stormkiln was
Strixhaven.
Strix, yeah. And then Magda was in the Kaldheim. Yeah, so like over the course of a year, basically, they said, here's Malcolm that is a flying pirate that if it connects or a pirate connects to anybody, you get treasure. Instantly good. Instant, this is another Tymna kind of level of commander. Just does the thing you want it to do. Ragavan took pretty much every format by storm, being a 1-drop or a hasty 2-drop that returns to your hand, gives you a treasure and steals somebody's card. Probably way too powerful, but that's the way the game has been going with certain cards here and there. Stormkiln, kind of a heavy investment, but if you're in the right kind of list, just makes you a fuck ton of treasures because it's every cast and copy.
Fucking card's unstoppable in the right deck.
I mean, and then you pair that up with a Burgi, and you're just making a fuck ton of mana over and over and over every time you cast something. And then some other more interesting payoffs, not necessarily something that creates treasures, but can use treasures to a great effect, is like Magda. Sack 5 treasures, tutor up any dragon or any artifact. The current champion of Marchesa going 7-0, not having any fucks. Just one dockside is enough for Magda to just say, I fucking win. You're welcome. So that's kind of it's kind of gone crazy in that sense, but then a lot of this is layers upon layers of this came out in one set, this came out in another set, this came out in another set, and now all of these things pieced together are just crazy.
Yeah, they just keep pushing the envelope on where they think the limit on treasure design is, and that's led to some very powerful cards in the last 18 months. For sure.
And it doesn't stop there. We've only gotten to, I think, the summer of last year. No, spring of last year. There's still more history. Just you wait. Because later in the summer, we got the D&D set, and there was Grim Hireling, Old Gnawbone, Prosper, Zorn, and Goldspan Dragon. I'm sorry, Goldspan was from fucking Kaldheim, wasn't it?
Yeah. And either Unexpected Windfall was in the D&D set.
Oh, it was. Okay. So Unexpected Windfall as well. Strike It Rich came out in Modern Horizons 2, but this is just a sample of things that have already been proven to be fucking busted. Grim Hireling by itself is a 4-drop, but it has it's 3/4 or 2/3. It's got a big body. And then whenever any creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you get 2 treasures. On top of that, you has an activated ability to sack treasures to give -X to target creature till end of turn. So it's removal. So you can make a ton of treasures and use them to exploit Nagila or any other outlet that you may have. But on top of that, can go ahead and remove all of the dorks
problematic creatures or
anything
pieces
that's stopping you. Yeah.
And it's a 4-mana card that can make 6 mana, so you can go like +2 mana just from playing it.
Yeah, in decks like Nagila, you can attack with Nagila, make an attacking warrior. Say you have just enough to where you have warriors going at each player, and for some reason they don't have blockers. You've just made 6 treasures, which is enough to activate Nagila, and you just win from there.
Yeah. Whoopsies! You just won the game. Nice work.
Oops. Oops. Gnawbone, way overcosted, like as far as CEDH goes for the most part. But if you can cheat that thing into play or reanimate it somehow, it just makes a fuck ton of treasures because it's a 7/7 by itself. So if you can swing with it, you get 7 treasures. Otherwise, anything else you're swinging is also going to just make you treasures equal to their power. So it can snowball out of control. I think it's more problematic it's more played in casuals, therefore more problematic there. But still,
it's definitely it's more of a concern in casual. But there's so many like really powerful 7-8 mana green creatures that can end the game on the spot. It's like Craterhoof Behemoth probably ends more games of Commander than Old Gnawbone.
Right.
I think people's biggest issue with it is that it creates a lot of artifacts.
Yeah, in CDH it can be detrimental because then it feeds the dock side, but it could also be the thing that just ends the game because you created all of those treasures. Strike It Rich, Unexpected Windfall, they're a little bit less impactful unless they're in the right deck, but they just simply replace themselves with a treasure while also drawing you cards or, also discarding, but they're just incidental value that also replace themselves with treasures. So sometimes you need that mana fix and you don't care about discarding this card in your hand. You just do the thing real quick and you get the treasure and you can do the thing you wanted to do in the first place. And that I don't think is necessarily bad. And coincidentally, both of these are in red, which tends to need more help with mana fixing if it's like the primary color. So I don't really see it as being problematic, but I think that they can be depending on the deck. If it's something that's like Izzet or Rakdos that's storming, and this is just increasing, or even Krark's, just increasing storm count while also getting more resources to then increase the storm count even further, it can snowball out of control to a point where it can be bad. But they also need to have enough of those effects at one time. So, yes, a deck that's running both of those plus other things that do kind of the same thing, then yeah, you might have an issue. But
yeah, so as we get closer to a critical mass of these like cards that pseudo refund themselves, I think that's like what scares me, because then you're like breaking the rules of Magic with like the mana system. You're like, oh, it doesn't matter if my cards are free or almost free.
Well, and they've kind of done that. Like Krark has already proven that with stuff that's older, or even what's that angel Feather, where they can kind of use these shitty combat tricks that cantrip. In the case of Feather, you get those back at end of turn. In the case of Krark, you have the potential to copy and then get it back too, so you can redo it. These like kind of lend themselves to those strategies where it's like, if I get this back, it's just constantly making me more treasures, and I'm also constantly drawing, discarding, or whatever the case may be. So it can, depending on what deck you have and how you've built the deck, it can potentially be pretty broken pretty fast.
Creates a snowball. It's hard to stop.
Right. Not that I honestly don't think that's problematic, though, if it's in the sense of somebody took a lot of steps to build up to that point, and then they said, hey, I did all these things, and now I've presented this loop. You guys couldn't interact with any of these points, so like they kind of deserve the win at that rate.
I mean, I think that ideology scales the power level. It's more of a problem when that stuff's going to spring up in like random people's casual games.
Yeah, I mean, that's usually when the issues are. That's why people have clamored to ban Dockside. And most people I know that have said that primarily play casual. Whereas everybody that I know that plays CDH is like, Dockside's fine. I shouldn't say that.
That's not entirely true.
No, I know enough people that have said like, oh, it's a bad card. But I think it's good and I don't want it to go. I was okay with Hull Breacher, even though that also was a good card and was great to use offensively. I was fine with it being gone. Dockside, I don't think is as problematic because a lot of times it is just a ritual for a couple mana.
Oh, for sure. Like, we played a game today just before this, and it was like he made 2 mana, like he went 2 mana positive.
Right.
And that's like just an okay ritual.
It's a pyretic ritual, essentially. Pay 2, got 3 kind of deal.
Well, pay 2, get 4, like whatever. That's not that bad. It's just the other things, like the fact that it comes on a body. So you're just like, oh, I play Cloudstone Curio, and now you make infinite mana.
Or Baron, or
Teamer Sabertooth.
Teamer, or Emil. Yeah, there's a lot of options now, too, that like every color's kind of... Almost every color can kind of do that.
Deadeye Navigator in blue, if you, if you want to play that.
I have that too. So then there were some other, supporty cards too, like Zorn, where it's just like each time you create a treasure, you create an extra treasure. That sort of thing is just, it's kind of win more, but still in the right deck does enough to potentially get you there when you couldn't. Things like Goldsman too is just like every time it attacks, you get a treasure. Like, and it's already a 4/4 with flying and haste. Like
for 5,
it's a little more busted in 60 card formats, which is why they alchemied the fuck out of it. But it's still viable in CDH. I mean, I played that in my own Magna list, so it's not terrible.
Yeah, Dragon makes treasure. Like it doubles your treasure's mana, which is not nothing.
That is probably the bigger part of it too, is that it's kind of like a Kinnan effect. It's pretty good. So the real reason why we kind of brought this up in the first place when we had our pre-production meeting was that Streets of New Capenna, the new set we just reviewed a couple weeks ago, it had quite a bit of treasure support. It has a lot of support for a lot of different things. 3-color support, and there's a lot of different utility cards that do different things. But it is... I don't know that it's any more or less than any of the other sets that have come out that had treasure support.
It has about 30 treasure cards, so it's more than the average set.
Like, so instead of having like just a Prosperous Innkeeper and a couple other things, I feel like the D&D set had a lot of treasure support because there was a lot of cards where you had to roll and you could make treasures, and like it's not as effective or as consistent, but still was doing it. I'm not sure if this set had more or less than that set, but that was probably the last set we had that had a big amount of it. So it's been about 7 months, something like that.
Probably more than that. Wasn't the D&D set like June? Okay, I want to say it was like June, but...
So damn near a year then?
Yeah.
So I mean, it has been a little while since they printed a fuck ton of support, but they've now done it again. And there are some that we already pointed out in the set review. If you haven't listened to that, it's up on the YouTube. It's up on Anchor. You can check that out. We gave our opinions on a lot of cards that did provide treasure support. But some of the bigger ones was essentially we were talking about Grim Hireling. This is kind of the newer version. It's the Professional Facebreaker. It's 1 less mana to cast. It's mono red instead of mono black. And instead of having the 2 treasure clause on damage, it's a 1 treasure. And instead of removal by using treasures to remove, it allows you to sack an artifact to get Impulsive Draw. So exile top card, and you can play it this turn. So kind of the same card, kind of the same impact in decks like Najeela or whatever. Very good Tymna attacker because it does have Menace, so it's going to get through. And if it doesn't, something else might. So, and you're making treasures on top of drawing cards with Tymna, so that just seems good. Same reasons Grim Hireling is good. It's good. I think in a lot of decks that can run both, you do. I personally am running both in a Grixis list and a Mardu list. So yeah, I mean it's just extra mana where you can get it in colors that aren't good at ramping. It's just going to be good, but it's just additional treasure support as well. And ironically, like they made it a warrior, so like it just double helps Najeela. Because at least the Grim Hireling was a tiefling rogue, so like it didn't do anything for Najeela. And in this case, they're like, Yeah,
Like,
let's give
no.
Najila another fucking tool because it isn't already fucking good. But then, then there's another card which I would say we were going to talk about when we were talking about Old Gnawbone. Bootlegger Stash is essentially kind of the same thing, but instead of getting a bunch of treasures on combat damage, it's like tap your lands to make treasures, which seems okay, except for you honestly are going to take a turn off to play it because I think it's like 5 or 6 mana.
It's 5 and a green, so it's like it's like a mana reflections. I think just like a bad one because it doesn't really double your mana right away.
Right, like you're not just immediately doubling. You're like, okay, I paid 6 mana, and that's my turn because I don't have anything else I can do. I have 1 mana left if I'm lucky, and like I don't have anything. So cool, turn off. Goes around the table, you're not dead. Cool. Now you're gonna just pass the turn and not do anything because you can do this at instant speed. So you're gonna hold up interaction, even though you probably don't actually have it, especially if you're mono green. And then you're gonna go around the table, and then it's the guy's end step before your turn. Now I'm gonna tap all of my mana. Just like you would do it in a crew fix list. Yeah, I'm going to tap all my mana, and I'm going to make 8 treasures or whatever. And then now you get a turn while you did nothing for fucking ever, and somebody's probably close to winning, and you're like, cool, I have 1 billion mana, but I'm going to play this mana dork, and I'm going to play this fucking... I don't see what you're doing with it to where that's broken.
You have to like have a Seedborn Muse and a doubling season out. And like at that point, you're winning the game on like probably a different metric than Bootlegger Stash to begin with.
Yeah, I think this card's a trap. I think we brought it up because it seemed cool and people were talking about it.
People are so mad about it.
And it's still a thing where, they're like, why the fuck does green get this? Because they already have the land ramp. And I get that argument. But at the same time...
That's why I think green should get this card. But that's also why green should get this card. It's the color of the most... Well, it's the color of the most mana production. So, like, Bootlegger Stash is a card that makes a lot of mana. So, to me, it makes sense to be green because it makes a lot of mana. It's a mana
sink for them. Yeah. It's just, like, what are they doing with it? I keep looking at it as, like, a mono green card. And it's like... If you're in mono green, you've probably already played out dorks and cultivates and things like that. You've done all that to get to this point to cast this thing, and now you're doing that to get ramp even more. It's like, what are you trying to pay for? What do you need 20 mana for that's going to instantly win you the game that you can't pay 8 mana for? Right?
How big does your Torment of Hailfire have to be to win the game?
Well, and I also said mono green specifically.
Yeah, so it's like finale devastation.
It's just finale, and that's it. And I guess that's cool, but you've played dorks and cultivates to get to this point, so you've got 2 mana dorks out that you're gonna fucking pump by 20, and they don't have trample or shit, and like you're gonna swing them, and people are gonna block it, and you're like, cool. So I took 2 turns off to do that. Like, how is that effective?
I feel you. I don't get the outrage to this card. And I honestly don't think it's that strong.
I feel like there's, like you said, there's a way to bust it. There's something, it is an artifact. So, where it's busted is probably in that Witherbloom Dragon.
Belladros.
So, right, because didn't it have some kind of untap clause or something?
Yeah, pay 10 life, untap all your lands, but you can only do it once a turn.
Right, so you do that with him, and then you also pack in like I was thinking the keys would do something with it, but I guess not. But I think that dragon is probably the place where this card goes, because you get to untap,
then you just get the value, and then you can do whatever you want. I'm sure you'd cast an Exsanguinate big enough to win the game.
Right, because he's already doing that kind of thing. It's already trying to exploit that whole, like, I get to tap all my mana to do shit, and then I get to untap all of it. So you just tap all of it into that thing, and then you untap it and do it again. You take 1 turn off. Well, it's still a turn and a half or whatever, but you get the even bigger thing. And then you're in black, so as you said, you can Insanguinate or Torment of Hailfire, and just or even one of the X draw spells and just ding yourself for 20 life and draw 20 cards. I'm like, yeah, and then, well, I guess you don't want to use that casualty one because then you just kill yourself with that example. But if you did, like, say you did it for 10 and you just double it up, and there you go.
There you go. Then you should be able to win the game.
So beyond those couple examples, there were others, but we're not going to go into those. As I said, check out the set review. We've talked about pretty much everything that we thought was interesting from the set. So,
and also, I think a lot of the new Capenna designs are like flavorful to the plane, but also to fix limited. Like some of them are just like 4 mana 3/3s that ETB make a treasure. Like no one's playing that in Commander. That's
for sure. And that was what I was going to say. There's like kind of a bunch of commons and uncommons that just make treasures like innocuously, and that's all they do. And they're not like 1 mana. They're like 4 mana or 5 mana. It's like a body that has lifelink and gives you a treasure. And you're like, cool. In limited, that's kind of good. But in everything else, it's not.
Especially in a 3-color environment. I think that's the goal of a lot of the cards in New Capenna. And just
it's a balancing thing.
Yeah.
And I don't see why people were upset about some of that kind of stuff. But, that's pretty much the day-to-day life of a Magic player. There's always some sort of outrage, right?
Overreacting on social media? What? Never. I would never.
Never. All right, so we're pretty much through the history. That brings us pretty much to current day. I'm sure there's stuff we miss. You can let us know in the comments. We're just giving kind of a general overview of the things as we see it as the time has gone on. So now I kind of have some questions for you, and I'll ask. You can answer, and then I'll answer as well, so we can see kind of where we stand after kind of going over what has happened with treasures and kind of the meta and things that we've seen happen with them overall. So first question is, do you think there are too many things that create treasures currently?
On the face, no. There's like lots of them just aren't really playable in Commander. I think the thing that stands out are the really strong ones because they usually create resource imbalances.
That's fair. People aren't opposed to the 4 mana ETB creature that creates a treasure. Nobody cares about that because there's
that's not really fucking doing anything.
Right. It's like Lotus Cobra. Like Lotus Cobra even is better than that because Lotus Cobra just comes down and then gives you value over and over and over again. So it's not that good. So being outraged about that, who cares? It definitely is more noticeable when it is a Smothering Tithe or like Dockside or Hull Breacher is a great example. That ended up being pretty much if you were in blue, you ran it regardless of what your deck was trying to do, just because not everybody, but you're going to run into a lot of decks that are going to run a wheel and you're just going to punish them if you have that in your hand. Not only do you stop them from drawing, but you also create a fuck ton of treasures. It was the single most busted, I think. It and Dockside were pretty much neck and neck, but it just did something when weaponized that was just fucking brutal, whereas Dockside requires a lot more setup.
Yeah, Dockside requires your opponents to do stuff, and the other thing with Hull Breacher is it reared its ugly head in casual a lot. Lots of people... even myself included, I had a Jeskai wheel deck with Brown and Shabazz, and for a while, like with my at-home play group, we played some pretty spiky casual decks, and I Hull Breachered people for fucking sure, and I didn't feel bad about it.
I surely played it. I wasn't somebody that really has strong opinions about it being banned. When it got banned, I was like, cool, I don't have to sit through those kind of games anymore where somebody is specifically like in red and blue and played every wheel they could and would like specifically mystical tutor for a wheel just because they had Hull Breacher in their hand and would just be like, I'm gonna fuck you guys and see if I can win. And then sometimes doesn't win for turns, and you're like, wow, I sat through all of that just for the other guy to fucking get to his consult win. Like, wow, this was fun. So, I mean, but at the same time, like you said, I run Brawl and Shabraz. I had it in there because I ran a couple wheels because they benefit the commander. So, makes sense. Nekuzars were running it. Like, everybody was running it. Because if nothing else, it was defense against a wheel if you didn't want to wheel. Somebody casts a wheel and you're just like, yeah, I'm just going to flash this in. It was no different than flashing in a Notion Thief. It was just easier to do.
And more
that's
decks
where it became,
would play it. Like you said, like Brawl and Shabraz can play Hull Breacher, can't play Notion Thief. Same with like the Locust God and shit. So then it's just more opportunities for people to slot it into their decks.
Right. Yeah. No, definitely. And also, if you were just mono blue, you just played it. If you were, I played it in casual in one deck, and it was what's her name? The pirate, the Grixis pirate from Ixalan, the captain.
Oh, Admiral Beckett Brass.
Yes, I played that because I pack pulled that when the set came out, and ended up pulling a lot of it. I ended up building it after Commander Legends because they were so much more travel or pirate support that was printed that I ended up taking all the pirates I packed because I bought a box. Got almost every pirate in the set in that box because most of them were commons and uncommons anyway. I got lucky with some of the legendaries and put it all together and said, okay, I'm going to play all of these pirates, and I'm putting Hull Breacher in because it's a fucking pirate, and I don't care. But I wasn't running wheels myself. It was just like there.
I had it in my pirate deck for the same reason. I was like, what's a pirate? There's not many fucking good ones. So I was like, I'll play this card. Yeah. I'm not playing any wheels, so it was innocuous then.
Right. And then, you sat through enough of those games to where it's like, eh. So like I said, when it got banned, I was like, yeah, I'm not happy or mad. It was just like, okay, cool, whatever. And I think if Dockside got banned, it'd be the same. I'd just be sad because I have a lot of lists that like have combos that revolve around Dockside. Not that it's the main game plan; it's just a game plan. I've got Mardu lists, I've got Grixis lists, I've got all kinds of lists that just like they have red, so you play Dockside. That's just how it is. It's kind of like Overture in that sense. Like, why wouldn't you? Because it's just a ritual. It's all it is. But in some cases, it's a ritual that just gets you to a win, and that's I think why people hate it, especially because it can combo with what did we name off like 5 or 6 cards earlier? Anything that can blink it. The
list goes on.
Right. Okay, so I don't think personally that too many things are creating treasures. I think we're in an okay spot. I think that it could get to that point, honestly, but we won't really know until we're there, and maybe then they move on to something else. I don't know. I don't think that they're going to go shy away from it at this point.
No, I agree with you there. And I think like I don't think it's problematic the amount of things that make treasure. It's just that the how powerful the strong ones are.
Yeah, so like cards getting pushed to not just being a thing that ETBs that makes treasures, but being a thing that makes treasures and also lets you do something with treasures. So the Facebreaker and the Grim Hireling, which we just discussed, they're the poster children for this, where one of them makes treasures and then also can blow up shit for treasures, and the other one gives you card advantage. So that is definitely more push than Dockside, even though Dockside can lead to splashier plays and can lead to game-ending states. These two can as well with other cards like Najeela and so forth. So,
and they're both engines and the payoff at the same time on one body.
Right. I mean, even Kenrith can use stuff like this because they're like, yeah, I'll swing in with this guy, make treasures, and then sack it to get cards off the top. And then, I can't use that. Okay, well then I'll use the treasures that I created to use one of Kenrith's abilities and draw the card or whatever. So it's definitely been pushed. Ragavan's a good example too, just being 1 mana and it's a 2/1.
Yeah, that's
and
fucked up.
Fucking I mean, they based it off of the Kari Zev attacked and created a Ragavan. And so Ragavan finally got his own card. And he was a 2-1 there. He's a 2-1 here. But his 2-1 back there was just a fucking 2-1. Now he's a fucking 2-1 that hits you, makes a treasure, and exiles the top card of your library, which I'm sure many of you, myself included, have been hosed by that, where, you know, they flip your Adnaz off the top and you're like, cool. Or that your Thassa's and you're like, yeah, I literally can't win now because of that.
And then, you know, any person who's played Modern or Legacy in the last year probably also has some strong opinions about that card, because it's been a terror in those.
4 of is insane.
Yeah, that's why the fucking thing's $100 now, or thereabouts.
Truth be told, I still do not own one. When it came out, it was already too fucking expensive, and now it's too fucking expensive. And it's the kind of card where they probably don't reprint it because it's had so many issues. You know? Like,
oh, yeah, they'll just like ban it in 18 months or something.
And then we'll just never see it.
Eternal formats. And it's harmless in Commander. Like, it's strong in CDH, but only in the first couple turns.
Right. Yeah, after that, there's enough blockers out that it just
your turn
can't
fucking
trade.
your turn 4 Ragavan sucks.
I mean, even swinging into somebody with a mana dork, they're just like, yeah, fuck you. I'm gonna kill your Ragavan. Like, I'm not letting you exile the thing off my top. Yeah. So
yeah, they're just like, fuck off.
Right. And so then, like, I think that they have pushed it a bit, but I can't say that I don't like the direction. I do like more efficient cards that do multiple things. I am a huge fan of anything that's modal, you know, outside of these new shitty fucking charms that don't do anything. But that's that's different story.
That's charms in general.
Yeah, charms, like, yeah. Charms are fine in certain circumstances. I just like modal cards. Like, Abrade is a great example. Kill a Drannith Magistrate, kill a Ragavan, kill a fucking Esper Sentinel, or blow up somebody's Mana Rock, or somebody's fucking Chalice of the Void that's stopping you from winning. You know, it's just
Curse Totem or
two
some
modes,
shit.
same mana cost. I love it. I also love cards like Damn, where it's 2 black, destroy a creature, or 2 and 2 white, destroy all creatures, or anything that's overloaded, Cyclonic Rift, etc. Just modal cards are just fucking amazing. Muddle the Mixture, being able to tutor off of a counter spell, like, that's the kind of shit I live for, and I like having those effects. I just think that they need to make sure that they're fair. And in the case of Facebreaker and Grim Hireling, I don't think that they're unfair. I think they're more fair than Dockside, because Dockside just punishes anyone who plays an artifact deck.
Or anything, an enchantment deck. Like, it's not
right.
Like, it's just that it's both artifacts and enchantments makes that card really egregious. And I agree with you. It's just if these designs are okay, like Facebreaker and Hireling, what happens when we get like the really pushed one? Because these are powerful and they, like you say, they're pushed. Like, what happens when there's like the really, really strong one?
It's a combination of the cards being pushed that is it's not so your fear is that, like, eventually there's going to be something that's so pushed that it's like, what the fuck, and it's going to get banned and it's going to be a big thing. I think that kind of already happened with Hull Breacher, and I think they've kind of found some more fair ways to do it with these examples. But at the same time, there's the unexpected synergies with older cards where one of these comes out and they maybe didn't think about it. Playtesting didn't happen with it. You know, their collective design team and playtest teams are, you know, maybe a few hundred people at most.
Fuck, if that, a few hundred.
Yeah, it's probably less.
Probably like 50
right
at most.
I was being generous. Sure. And then there's millions of Magic players. So yeah, and the collective hive mind is going to solve shit and find shit and just figure out, like, literally the day of any spoiler comes out, people have already found ways to break it.
Oh yeah, there's like 45 minutes. Someone's like, oh, I figured out an infinite combo with this card.
Right. Like, you don't really even have to do research yourself. You can purposely not look anything up and do your own research with Scryfall, which I've done. I'm sure most people have done because they didn't, know where the resources were or didn't follow the appropriate social media thing to see it. But if you're plugged in, so to speak, you're gonna see combos immediately as soon as spoilers come out. And it's always this new card came out, and this instantly breaks this card that got printed 18 months ago, 3 years ago, whatever. Or there's this old ass fucking Visions card that was printed 25 years ago that just so happens to interact with this in a busted way. Either way, somebody's going to find that shit out, and it happens all the time. Some good examples, Mayhem Devil and Treasures is like a match made in heaven. Specifically by itself, Mayhem Devil will allow you to ping for 1 damage any target every time anyone, yourself included, sacrifices something. So if you make a bunch of treasures, you sack them, use Mayhem Devil, kill things on the board. Or kill the player that's super low. If anyone else sacks anything as a result of anything, I'm going to play a fetch land, I'm going to sack it, kill your mana dork. So it really benefited from treasures in the sense of, like, Cloudstone Curio loops with Dockside, and a Mayhem Devil just wins you the game.
Yeah, you just shoot the whole table down.
Right, you loop for infinite treasures, and then you sack all the treasures to kill everyone. Corvold is another good example. He himself doesn't have anything to do with treasures, but he was created right on the cusp of them really like going towards exploiting treasures, and Dockside again combos with Corvold very well if you can perform any sort of loop with it. Even just itself making a bunch of treasures for him to sacrifice to draw cards to make mana, like at the same, it's a perfect enabler for a commander like him. But everybody kind of at the time knew that those Brawl deck commanders were kind of pushed as it was.
Oh, definitely. Those were designed to sell arcane signets.
And
those commanders. That had to be the draw, right? Like, how are they going to get people like us who aren't really buying, like, aren't going to buy into that format to pick up those decks?
I had zero interest in Brawl, but I bought a Hullen deck, and I bought the...
I bought the Alayla deck because it had a Smothering Tithe in it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's one I bought too, because Smothering Tithe. But I bought the Hullen, and I never built it. Because, like, as soon as that deck came out, the meta was just that everywhere. Didn't matter if you were playing casual or competitive, that's all you saw all the fucking time. It got annoying as shit until people figured out how to, like, make the CIA build where it's like, these 3 win cons go, and it just does its thing. But then there's other examples too, like Reckless Fireweaver.
Died to that card a lot.
That card has become
in the last 6 months.
Ironically, came out with Kaladesh, which was a really pushed set at the time. Had a lot of busted cards. Was kind of, I think, overlooked at that point. Maybe in standard it had uses.
I never really saw the card until like the last 6 months. We started seeing like Togo decks and shit crop up more regularly. And then
I too built that deck.
Lonus, that was another one.
Yeah.
We started seeing those types of cards, and then you started seeing some of these older cards like Reckless Fireweaver, Disciple of the Vault from like the original Mirrodin, another old ass Magic card that just like 1 black mana. It's just whenever an artifact leaves the battlefield, I think it's target player, target opponent loses a life.
Yeah, I believe that's it.
And yeah, like super innocuous. You see it in like I've seen it in some artifact combo decks, but in the last year, that's another card that's made a real resurgence. And
I think a lot of people are trying to do anti-treasure tech, which when we were, full disclosure, when we were having our pre-production meeting, Beth was still involved, and that was one thing that she brought up was that counterplay is something that's there, which kind of leads back into the whole outrage about too many things creating treasures, people being mad about Old Gnawbone, being mad about Dockside, being mad about anything that makes too many treasures, the Bootlegger Stash, etc. There's always counterplay. We've brought this up a couple times throughout this episode, so hopefully people will remember which points we brought up, but there's always counterplay to any strategy. If somebody's playing aggro, you play Creature Hate and they get shut down. If somebody's playing ramp, you play Dampening Sphere. There's always an answer for any specific strategy. The issue is playing into a general meta. If you're playing with randoms, if you're playing in an LGS where it's not a set group of people. And even people like me and Fitz that stream, that have a lot of different guests that may even be content creators of their own, that have gotten their own influences from their own spheres of people. Everybody's going to have their own opinions on what they think is good, what they think is bad, how they build decks, and how you're going to interact with them is going to change based on, you know, your deck and their decks and the pod composition. There's a lot of variables that go into every game of Magic. But so obviously you can't plan for every inevitability that there could be. You can't build a 100-card singleton list that's going to take care of every single strategy that you might come across, but you can pack in as much as you can, as long as it's synergistic with your list. I think that's what makes a good CDH list, is having the right interaction for things that are common in the meta, but then also tweaking it a little bit to your personal meta. And it may not be a specific play group of just these 4 guys that meet every week. Some people are lucky enough to have that. I don't have that. I don't think Fitz has that. Right. We kind of built that on our own online.
And being part of a million Discords, for better or worse.
Right. I also think that it's probably better, and I think we talked about this with our second episode where we talked about curating your pods. I think it's honestly better to have more than just that singular pod of, you know, you and your 3 friends that get together every Friday night, drink beers and play EDH. That's fun. Don't get me wrong. That's great. I love that, and I would love to have that. But being able to play online with an expanded group of, like, you know, say 30 to 50 people that you play with regularly, and I don't mean regularly like every week, but, you know, once a month, once every couple of months, you know,
that shit makes you better at Magic.
Yes,
that's how you improve, I think, because it's easy to stagnate if you just only ever played the same, like, 10 people or you know, whatever.
It's a pro and a con. It's a pro in the sense that you have that ability to play against different decks and test your deck against a multitude of different decks. That helps you pilot it. It helps you get better at the deck, know what mulligans you're going for, know what to tutor for, knowing your combo lines, being better at it in general. But it's also a con in the sense that you can't really specifically build in counterplay for everyone. You can only build it in for whoever you think you can build it in for. So, like, for instance, if you play against these 4 guys every weekend, you know this guy is always playing a fast combo deck, so you need to pack in Rule of Law to stop him from being able to cast more than one spell. This guy is always playing a ton of artifacts. So you know, pack in a Dockside to get the value, pack in an Oof to shut his shit off, so that you have both options, right? Other guys playing a fucking creature-heavy deck that does Yisan things, so you want a Curse Totem. Like, you have those options for those guys. But you can't necessarily play all of those at the same time, because your deck might get shut off by the Oof or the Curse Totem or whatever. So you have to kind of pick and choose what you're going to put in and what you're going to keep out. And that's important to know what kind of decks you're playing against. So again, if you're playing against a bunch of randoms or going to an LGS, you're going to have to kind of put in what you think is going to help you the most, and, you know, kind of take your best guess. And you might run into some new arch enemy at the store that comes in and kicks everybody's ass for a few weeks until everybody realizes what they need to put in their decks to stop it. But again, makes you a better Magic player. So just to give some examples of counterplay, we've already kind of gone over some, but generally speaking, there are a few different specific strategies that a good portion of lists rely on. It's either going to be creature based or artifact based, or they're storming, which means a lot of spells, or landfall. I mean, really, that's it. And there's enough stacks pieces that can shut down all of those strategies, be it hate bears or enchantments or artifacts. So it really depends on what your list is and what it's doing. For example, my Sithis list is cool with playing all of the artifact hate that it can to stop other people from ramping out and going crazy with their artifacts or doing dockside shenanigans. But it doesn't really want Rule of Law effects because I want to storm. Like, it wants to slow the table down enough to where I can get to a point where I can storm and they can't. So that's one example. But generally speaking, Artifact Shutdown, you're going to have Stony Silence, Kataki Wars Wage that makes them have to pay a tax. There's
Oof.
Oof is a big one. There's additional taxes that just make it harder to cast those things. The Thorn of Amethyst and what's her name? Thalia. And the Glow Rider, there's a few of those. So there's a ton. We could go over that for probably an entire episode of each individual thing that can shut down each individual strategy. But generally, those are the big ones. There's also ways to stop people that are trying to do, like, say, Thassa's Oracle and Consultation. Not only can you stop them by using, like, a Cephalid Coliseum or a couple other cards that, like, force them to draw after their library is empty, so they'll lose before the Thassa's trigger goes off. But you can also do stuff like Angel's Grace, or play out a Platinum Angel, or Teferi's Protection, or that new Kieran that also makes it to where you can't lose the game as long as it's equipped.
Getting into
those
the
kinds
trials.
of things. Yeah. There's the Planeswalker version that's harder to interact with. There's an option for every strategy to get you into a position where you're not going to lose to it. Now, granted, a lot of times you're only playing this if you're in lower color decks that are running white. So, for instance, Boros or Selesnya, they have the most access to these, because honestly, a large portion of them are green or white. There are a couple blue stacks pieces like Arcane Laboratory, which is a rule of law, or Ristic Study is kind of a taxing effect. But like, there's that one too. I don't remember the name. Frozen Aether, I think.
Where it makes their stuff enter tapped.
It's lands, creatures, and artifacts. Yeah. So it's like Root Maze plus Blind Obedience, which is. And why the fuck does blue get that? Like,
it was actually a time shifted card of like some old white card, Kismet.
Right. Yeah, I think it was
time ago.
One of those Portal or Future Sight type cards that
where they just flip the color. They're like, oh, what if this was now blue?
Yeah, like it'll never see a reprint, but here it is.
I think all those effects are good, and I think with anything like those, like especially with stacks and stuff, you should scale that to the power level of your table. I don't think you should run Stony Silence in like your random enchantments deck if you're like just playing in a casual environment. I don't think that's gonna create the greatest play experience.
Yeah, I would agree that a lot of stacks doesn't feel good, and a lot of casual players want a feel good experience. And I use quotes just because that's what's said, not because I'm trying to belittle it. It's not a like us versus them thing. It's more of like that's what people want. They want this, experience where they're like, yeah, I got to do this big swingy thing, and like as long as I got to, what's the black commander where if you cast it from anywhere besides your hand, you lose?
Phage.
Yeah, so like people say
Phage the untouchable deck.
Right. And so like somebody's like, I got to cast my Phage and I didn't lose the game. That's a win for me. That's what a lot of casual players come to a table with that mindset of, this is what I want to do. And as long as I meet this small achievement, I feel like I won. And to preserve that sort of experience, a lot of people, that's why land destruction, for instance, is against the social contract, because people just feel like that's a not a feels good experience, so they don't want to have that in their games. In the same sense, they don't want those hard stacks. Like for me, it's like the orbs. If I'm playing casual, I'll play stacks. I'm going to play Hate Bears. Like you're not going to stop me from playing Hate Bears in casual. Like, sorry, you don't like it. Like Dranith is still going to come down, but I'm not going to play a Winter Orb. I'm not going to play a Static Orb. I'm not going to play a Torpor Orb. I'm not going to play all this shit that's like smokestacks. Like, I'm not going to play anything that's that crazy. Armageddon. But on the same token, when I play casual, I don't play Mana Crypts. I don't play Chrome Moxes or Mox Diamonds.
Oh, yeah. And you and I, Izlain, have a lot of the same ideology like that when it comes to casual games. Like, right. I have some hate bears in my mono white deck, but I'm also not like soft blocking the table. I mean, like I play like the Thalia, that makes shit enter tapped. I play Drannith Magistrate in my mono white deck, and like those cards,
and you should.
Yeah, just create a little bit of extra tempo for a mono white or Boros deck. I was talking more like playing the hard hate pieces,
right,
to counteract what you might like, just because someone has like, say, a strong Prosper deck in your play group, and you're like, I'm gonna fucking play Stony Silence in all my white decks. That might not be creating the best play experience in casual, especially as games aren't gonna end as quickly. Then you're kind of like artificially inflating the game time.
Well, and I think that's kind of part of the arms race that happens, is that people have, if they have a dedicated play group, they do end up having that whole, like, Timmy fucking plays a ton of fucking artifacts and always wins because he has all these resources that we don't have because we're playing Boros. So I'm going to play Stony Silence to stop him. And then that one game where you stop him and he's just like, fuck, I can't do anything. This fucking sucks. And then the whole rest of the game, he's salty as shit. And then everybody's like, well, maybe you shouldn't play that anymore because Timmy's super salty. It was like, well, at the same time, like, Timmy always fucking wins because Timmy plays this fucking jank bullshit that does a thing and none of us can stop it. But this card stops it. So, like, why shouldn't I fucking play it? So it is kind of a catch-22 in a lot of ways. I was also kind of approaching this from a CDH standpoint.
I know you are. Yeah. I was just offering, like, I think that it's easy to take these ideas, and I've seen lots of them being played in casual. Right. And it's like, I think it's important, especially if you're playing with...
I play Dockside in casual. Guilty as charged.
So do I. I played my Felden deck, and I'll copy it like 3 fucking times. Yeah. And I think the card is, maybe too powerful.
I also see him do it on, like I've been watching game nights. I don't watch it as much anymore because I'm more into the CDH side of things now. But when I first started getting into EDH, I watched game nights all the time. And I seen videos where, like, especially when, like, Cassius Marsh was on, he was just like, yeah, I got this blingy ass deck. I'm rich. Fuck, I'm rich, bitch. And slammed some shit on the table. And, like, fucking just wrecked everyone. And it was like, going into it, he had the Pub Stopper deck. And it kind of gave that bad taste in your mouth of, like, yeah, that's a thing that people experience at casual tables, at LGSs all the time. Because they sit down and they say, well, I got a power level 7. And the guy's like, yeah, mine's a 7 too. And then he's just like, foil fucking dual land. And you're like, what? I don't even know if those exist, but you know what I mean? Like, he's like,
but yeah, they're like, oh, box topper mana vault, and I play a mana crypt, and I fucking play heuristic study, and
yeah, and you're like, well, I thought we were playing casual. These are like casual 7s, right? And like, yeah. Like, I'm not doing nothing. It's just mana. And then they're like, fucking Eldrazi foil box topper fucking dude, and you're like, wait, what? Like, I don't feel like, and those are the kinds of players where you want to have that fucking Stony Silence. You just shut their bullshit off. So it's kind of it's a difficult spot where I think treasures enable a lot of things that are good, but they also enable a lot of things that are busted, and it's kind of just a tricky balancing act that Wizards is going to have to play with as they go along, because I don't think it's going to stop. Like,
no,
if they all of a sudden ban Dockside, maybe this shit would stop. But at this point, they're basically saying, the RC and them are both saying that, like, this is okay and it's going to keep happening as it goes forward.
I also think going forward, we aren't going to see treasure production like we've seen in New Capenna. I think New Capenna has more treasure production than, like, you're going to see in the next set. Well, the next one's a D&D set, so okay, maybe not that one, but like the next standard legal set. Like when we do the Brothers War, Dominaria United, I don't think those will have the same amount, like the same quantity of treasure cards that we just saw in New Capenna.
No, I don't think so either, because we already said that it was basically almost a year since the last set that really had a big influx, which was the last D&D set last summer. And we're coming up on summer again.
Yeah, and the upcoming one being like a Commander Legends 2, I could see it still having strong treasure presence.
Also, their design space is like at least, I think, like 18 months or 2 years ahead of time.
They're about 18 months ahead of us.
So, yeah, like whatever they were designing recently you can expect to see trends like that continuing. But then they also released, side tangent, we're going to put this in. They released a story, little tidbit of story on the mothership either today or yesterday, with Elish Norn in the story. So our whole prediction of, we've already gotten, what's the green one?
Vorinclex?
Yeah, we already got Vorinclex. We already got Jingataxis. Elish Norn might be the next one.
We had Urbrask
just now. Yeah, so we got Shieldred and Elish Norn left, and I think they're leading up to next year. We're going to have a return to Phyrexia.
To new Phyrexia, yeah. I think so too. Also, I think Shieldred's dead in the story. So I expect
that doesn't mean anything. Elspeth has taken how many forms now? Like that bitch was alive and then had like 4 cards and then died and had like 2 cards and then like came back to life and has a new card in a new set that just came out. And she's been dead for how long? Like
only as long as they needed her to be.
Right. Like, so I don't think we're worried. And now
she's like an angel, because they don't really explain any of that in New Capenna.
Yeah, but either that or like some kind of construct that runs on Halo.
Maybe, because it's like implied she might be hundreds of years old. I don't get it.
Well, she was already given the timeline going back to Innistrad. Like, was it Innistrad? Yeah, because she was all part of the whole thing with the Emrakul getting imprisoned.
Oh no,
on the moon
that's Nahiri.
Oh yeah, wrong player, wrong Planeswalker.
But in the end of the New Capenna story with Elspeth, she can like hear the song of the angels before they all wake up.
Yeah, there's something going on there. She's gonna be back. And so again, Shieldred was already a reanimator kind of creature, so it's very likely that like it'll just be a zombie praetor or something.
Ooh,
be spicy. So to wrap up the overall discussion, the final question of this podcast: are treasures good for the game and the form and various formats in the long term? What do you think?
Ooh, I mean, I want to say yes, because like a lot of the more innocuous treasure designs have had no lasting impact on really any format. It's just the higher power ones, or when they really turn those knobs, those are the ones we've seen that have had a large impact. Like the Ragavans, Smothering Tithe, Dockside that we fucking talked about a lot. Like those are the ones that I think have shown that there could be unhealthy treasure designs.
Yeah.
And I personally think Dockside should be banned. I'm definitely on that camp. That is the one I think where they went a little too far. But even like, I don't think Smothering Tithe should be banned.
I think Smothering Tithe is good because it's white. If it wasn't white, like if it was a green card, ban the fucking shit out of that. Like, green doesn't need the help. Just like we said with Bootlegger Stash, they don't need it. Although, we already covered how that could be used and blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of a cool little combo piece for like one niche deck that's never going to see much play otherwise. So whatever, let her have it. Still, I would agree that the overarching theme of this entire episode, the thing that we touched on more than anything, was Dockside. So Dockside is definitely the most impactful card that had treasures stapled to it. However, I don't think it's broken. I think it's fair. I think it's fair because it requires multiple other pieces to break, and otherwise is just a ritual. And in the sense that it can be a ritual that can get you over the top and can win you a game, I've seen it time and time again where it gets cast for 3. The other day, somebody cast it in a game and they were expecting to get 4, but there was just enough stuff that could be sacrificed that they got 1. So they cast a Dockside for 2 and got 1 mana back. Like, Oof. It can be that bad. And it's only that bad when somebody has a jeweled lotus and a lotus petal and treasures they can sack, or some blood tokens or clues that they can pay into to sack. Like, there's obvious reasons why that can end up being a net bad for the person who played it. But generally, especially in CDH, people are going to gravitate towards using it in decks where it's not just a ritual and then it's used to win the game because it's that strong. So it has that ceiling. And that's, I think, why people want it banned, especially in casual. But in casual, I think it's only used in that sense. Its ceiling is to make a ton of mana.
Yeah, that's kind of
they can use to cast 7 or 8 drops. Whereas in CDH, it's not being used in that way. It's being used in a way to loop to make infinite mana. So I think in CDH, it's completely fucking fair. People are using it as a combo piece, and we don't care about any other combo piece that exists.
I'm with you there, Izlain. I agree. Like, once we're in the competitive realm, I think Thassa's Oracle is a fine card. It just wins the game.
Right.
Is a hard
in casual, it's pretty much trash. Like, nobody really is winning with Thassa's in casual.
No. Right. Some people are. Sure, but you're going to see it a mile away, and they would have just done it with Labman a couple years ago.
Right.
I think
the same thing. Yeah.
My biggest issue with Dockside probably is in the casual environment, it just punishes people for developing their board, and then the output is just someone else is really far ahead. And I don't that's what I don't like. Is it?
Yeah, I see that as being it's well, the problem is that when it was printed, there wasn't enough treasure support for it to be that big of a deal. So it ended up where it was really an answer for mono red decks and for Boros decks.
I agree. And those decks were way more hurting a couple years ago, too.
Right.
They've gotten so many more.
Anything that was a 2-color deck with red didn't have the fucking ramp, didn't have the ability. So a Dockside was really printed to punish the Joyras and stuff that were rampant in casual, where Joyras, I can't count how many times I played Joyra or Elsha in casual, which they're just kind of designed to be more competitive as it is. So, you got to sit through those long-ass turns of them doing their thing and then not actually winning. And your equalizer was you play that Dockside after they didn't win, and you get 20 fucking treasures, and you play out 5 creatures and a Crater Hoof, and you just fucking win. And you're like, yes, get them. I got them back. And so in that sense, I think it's a totally fair card. But then now, with all of the support and everything else, Dockside seems like a mistake. But it's only a mistake now. It wasn't at the time, I don't think. And so I don't think that it necessarily deserves a ban, because I think it still is completely fair towards the higher end. It's one of those Rule Zero conversations that people have to have amongst their own dedicated play groups.
I think if you're having in a casual environment, having your pregame conversation, if you're going to be talking about cards like Mana Crypt and things like that, you should definitely be talking about Dockside Extortionist.
Yeah. No, fair. If they're running Fierce and Force and Pact and Mana Vault and Mana Crypt and every fucking Chrome Mox, whatever, if they're running all of those things and you're okay with that, then yeah, Dockside is definitely a part of that conversation. But getting away from just Dockside, because that's been kind of a focus for a few minutes here, going back to treasures in general, my answer to the question of them being good for the game and the format of EDH specifically, I can see where maybe they're bad for 60-card formats, but we're primarily focused on
I
EDH
can't speak
and CDH.
To that. I don't know. So, I don't know how to fucking play Standard or Modern.
I play Historic on Arena, and I have some decks that make some treasures, but it's not. The Dockside isn't a thing there, so you don't. It's a completely separate discussion. So, as to EDH and CDH, I think treasures are good for the format, in the sense that it gives every color some access to fixing. And they've always had it in the sense of like artifacts and like fetch lands and things like that. Even in casual, you're just running your Evolving Wilds or your Terramorphic Expanse, or like the new cards from New Capenna, which are like they're like the panoramas, but they come in and like instantly sack themselves basically to get you
Or like
a
Fable
color.
Passage or whatever. Like that card's pretty cheap. Shit like
Yeah,
that.
all of those cards totally fine. Fixing is good. You have access to those in any colors that you want. So like the fixing is there, but I think treasures expedite the fixing in a sense, because instead of having to turn one, drop an Evolving Wilds, and then wait till somebody's end step to sack it to get a tapped land that untaps so you can use it, instead you're playing a thing that's a creature. Like Ragavan's a bad example for casual, but we're just going to use them as an example. Like you can drop this creature on turn 1, and then turn 2 you get an additional treasure. Or like a better example for casual probably is like the Prosperous Innkeeper. It's 1 and a green. You play it. It's a 1/1 that triggers on creature ETBs. It basically has alliance creature ETBs. You gain a life, but it ETBs and creates a treasure, and that's actually faster technically than like a dork, even though it does require 2 mana investment. It refunds a mana, so it's essentially a 1-drop that gets you a mana you can use immediately instead of a 1-drop like Atlanta War Elves that takes a turn to get you a mana. So in that sense, I don't mind the speeding up of things, but I'm a sucker for efficiency. Even my casual lists run duels and run like I said, I'm not running the free rocks and stuff, but I still want that efficiency. So like having the treasures to do that, I don't mind. I think that the ability to fix in colors that need it more than others is great. It's just unfortunate that some of the cards have some of the treasure producers have kind of pushed, like say red. Like red has probably got the most access to it than any other color. So it's kind of gotten a big leg up on treasure production. So it's kind of gotten a big boost. But then cards like Smothering Tide really helped out white, and white's been getting a lot of excess card draw off of random things. So like it's kind of getting its own little renaissance. So
I think with even like, I guess Dockside's only 2 mana, but even if that was red instead of red 1, or like Smothering Tide was more than 1 white mana symbol, it would help those colors. Yeah, like would just help those colors more than push them into being playable in every deck that's red X or white X.
I guess that's another topic that we could dive into at another point. Like, is it really worth something to be just better, just strictly better, or to have more options? Like, do we want more? Like for instance, there's Land of War Elves, but then there's also Elvish Mystic, and then there's also Fyndhorn Elves. Like, do we want more of that, where we reprint the same functional card with a different name so it's available in a singleton format? Or do we want more cards that just eschew that and go, we're going to provide this 1 mana dork, but also give you a treasure on top of it? Like, to where it's pushed or more efficient. I lean towards wanting more efficient cards. Every time I start brewing a deck and I start digging in Scryfall, I find these old cards and I'm like, oh, that's so good if it was just not this expensive. Or that's so good if it just wasn't a 1/1. Like, there's just, there's certain aspects to where like we've pushed beyond. Every time a new set comes out, there's cards from some ancient set that become relevant again and get pushed more because they have some old synergy. But at the same time, each new set comes out makes some other cards obsolete. So it's definitely a weird balancing act that the company has to go through, and we're just going to analyze it as it happens. All right, so we've pretty much covered everything that we wanted to talk about with treasures. I think the consensus here is that we think that treasures are pretty good for the game, but we can also see where cards like Dockside could potentially be too good. So we'll share our opinions if that ban ever comes down. But until then, I'm Izlain. That's Fitz. We're going to sign off, and we'll see you guys in a couple weeks. Thanks for
Till
watching.
next time.